Hello again, whiskey friends. Thanks for joining, everybody, for another Tuesday discussion. Here on Tuesdays, we do like to give video responses to questions and comments that we get either on Instagram, YouTube, or from our absolutely wonderful Patreon community. Love all y'all. Thank you so much for the support. Now, today's question, I had to mix and mash this one a little bit because I thought it treaded on places that I've already answered in the last couple months. But one of the questions that I got was simply, what brands am I most excited about in 2024 thus far? I kind of did something already about what brands that I gravitate towards when it comes to the things that I like to drink. So I wanted to take a different approach with this particular question. And this has nothing to do with any of the releases, let's say, that are in my top 10 list. Instead, these are brands that I think are just absolutely killing it in 2024. They're changing the game, they're defining the year, and they're defining the year not because of like one bottle or one release. It's because they're coming out with multiple things and multiple things consistently that continue to grab my attention and take up a share of my whiskey budget. So, if you're interested to know what these brands are and why I like them so much, stick around. Thank you for joining today, whiskey friends. Let's kick off the show. All right. I always like having a little bit of a pour here before we get started, but I forgot to pour it in advance. So I'm trying to hide this bottle, so I'm not revealing it to you as we go. But cheers, everybody. Mm. I'll let you know what this pour is in just a moment. That was a good sip of it, though. So, what we're going to do is we're going to go through 5 brands that I think are really defining 2024, not just with one release, but they keep releasing multiple things. And what I'm going to highlight are either going to be blenders or people that are experimenting with casks that are coming out with multiple releases that are really, really good, or brands that are just like coming alive this year. And that's going to be the first brand that I'm going to highlight. I got to shout out Green River. This one here that I got in my hands is a pick that just came into the house from the Bourbon Junkies. They did this for their Bourbon in the Barn event. But man, does this pick blow me away? I also love what Mash and Journey did, what Jason and Scott picked from them earlier in the year. And my friend Top Dog has given me a lot of good Green River samples as well of single barrels that he's gotten his hands on. Each and every one of them has blown me away. On top of those single barrels, though, they also released that more widespread foolproof that is also very well priced, very affordable. And also, their rye whiskey is killing it this year too. And I just started getting my hands on being able to sample some of their cast strength rye. Woo wee! Ooh, we are in for some treats as the year goes on. But what I love most about Green River is they waited till they hit about 5 years to start releasing things. They picked a very good price point for their base releases. And now that we are starting to get some of the cast strength releases to see all the potential that's lying behind this distillate, it is endless. This is probably the brand that I'm most excited about to see what happens to them when they hit 7 years, 8 years, and beyond. I think their trajectory is better than any other distillery out there right now. I consistently get shades of a Buffalo Trace like cherry when I do drink Green River. I don't think many things can tread on Buffalo Trace's base profile, but Green River is getting there. And the fact that they have a little bit more rye, which is something I prefer as well, makes me think that when those get up to 8 years old, they might be at or better than even like Stag Junior. So I know that is a tall order to ask, but that is how excited I am about Green River. If you haven't tried Green River yet, it is going to be probably the best Buffalo Trace alternative on the market for those that have issues getting their hands on Buffalo Trace, particularly if you like a little bit more rye spice. Now, along the same lines, though, just a coincidence. I like this brand in general, but this release is something that I just reviewed from Two Soul Spirits. You can go back to that video to check out that review. But Two Souls is a very interesting brand who is bringing in casks from all over the country from typically smaller distilleries or more craft distilleries. And a couple releases recently really caught my eye and caught my heart. This one here is a cask strength Green River that was then finished in rum casks and then ex-bourbon casks. Very, very interesting how the rye, the rum, and the bourbon all play together. There are some more bottles behind me that also were sourced from Middle West with their pumpernickel rye. And they couldn't just take a great pumpernickel rye single barrel. No, they had to do something interesting with it. And then finished it in a barrel that used to have a hazmat rye in it. And it just darkened the profile, made it so interesting. So different than all the other pumpernickel rye single barrels I got my hands on so far. And then before that, they had a release where they also got a watershed from Columbus, Ohio as well, and finished it in another watershed barrel. Now, the thing that interests me the most is I actually got to try that other watershed barrel that they finished it in. And this concept of using finishing to balance a profile is very interesting to me. They essentially took what was a very, very dark, spicy bourbon and finished it in a barrel that once contained a very sweeter profile bourbon from that exact same distillery to get those two things to marry as if they were blending them. I don't know of many brands that are finishing in that type of mindset where they're actually creating blends. Totally intrigues me, and Two Souls keeps doing that, and I keep an eye out on their website every time I can do it. Those can be a little pricey. Typical releases are between $95 and $99. But if you're into somebody who's looking for something unique to try, they are a brand to keep an eye on. Once again, that's Two Soul Spirits, and you can get their stuff from their website. The next brand I'm going to highlight is near and dear to my heart and is also a 5-minute drive from work. So I do frequent them very often on my lunch break just to see if there is anything at the distillery. But man, was this one heck of a year so far for New Riff. So the thing that's so exciting about New Riff right now at this point in time, they held back from releasing their older distillate. You know, it's like all you could get from the bourbon all of this time since like 2019 was 4-year bourbon outside of some special releases. But even then, those aren't necessarily their core mash bill. Some of their experimentals have gotten higher up in age. Discounting those, their core releases of the bourbon and rye, they dropped them this year with 8-year age statements. This bourbon in particular, I have destroyed some of these bottles and I have shared them with everyone I can just to change their mind on what New Riff is and what New Riff has to offer. The 8-year rye also came out. Loved that release. And then on top of things, I've also gotten my hands on a 6-year single barrel rye, which is the oldest single barrel released. They released that one in response to their 10-year anniversary. And they also did another special release for their 10-year anniversary called the Headliner that had 10-year-old bourbon, 9-year-old rye, and 7-year single malt that was finished in sherry, all blended together to essentially celebrate everything they've done over the last decade. Oh, another great release. So New Riff right now is killing it. And next to Green River, this is the distillery that I think has one of the highest trajectories. I can't wait till we start getting 10-year, 12-year age statements even. But also, I really, really, really want an 8-year rye or an 8-year single barrel bourbon. The reason rye popped in my mind there is I also be remiss without saying they just dropped batch 2 of the sherry finished malted rye, which is something, if you go back through my channel history here, the very first recorded video I ever released was praying that New Riff would drop more sherry finished malted rye. And they just did it in like the last couple of weeks here. So So many releases. That's like a handful of releases I just spouted off. And that didn't even count their special releases from the spring and all these type of things. Killing it. Can't wait till this 8-year gets further around the country too. That should be happening later this year. Another brand I'll highlight, this is going to be brand 4 on this list of 5. But one of the other brands that I continue to track here, and I'm going to keep doing it, is going to be Kluke. They blend some great, great whiskey. These are blends of Indiana and Kentucky distillate. Now, not only are they doing the batches, which are more straight blends, they're also doing toasted bourbons. They got rye releases. Toasted rye, I think, just dropped. There's also, I got batch 8 in my hands. There's a batch 9. There's a batch 7. Depends what you get your hands on. Every single one of them is going to be a little different. Did have them on the channel just a few months ago. You know, Jonathan came on and kind of walked us through his process and what he does, and just the way that he describes how he blends things, and then he blinds them, and he comes up with different combination, and he blinds those against each other to eventually hone it down to what is going to be the release for that batch. Love the process, love the brand, and all the passion that goes into that blending shows. One of my favorite blenders of 2024 as well. All right, now we're to our last brand here, and this is going to lead to what is in the glass. And hey, shout out to the Bourbon Junkies for doing what they've done. This is just crazy to me. I'm wowed by it. I'm inspired by it. I constantly think about all these different things that they've put in motion and that they have in place. But I'm going to highlight the Bourbon Junkies and their Essence brand and all of the other releases that they have done this year. Now, the biggest release to date, I believe, was close to 1,000 bottles. But a lot of these other ones are maybe, I think maybe this one was 360. If I got it right in my head, I'll go over the details of this one in just a moment. They've also released a whole lot of single barrels of the distillate that they have. The thing that is impressing me most about the Bourbon Junkies operation over there at Ever North Spirits in Michigan, which I just got to visit just a few weeks ago, is the fact that they got barrels from places that you might not expect them to hedge their brand on. So a lot of their distillate, as an example, comes from Maryland and Sagamore. Now, when I say this one right here is a Sagamore rye, it's not MGP rye. It is a Sagamore rye. It's Sagamore's distillate. They also have the bourbon that is Sagamore's bourbon. Great as well. I've gotten to drink more Sagamore's own product through Essence and these brands than I have through those companies themselves. They've also brought in what they call their American whiskey, which is like a malted wheat whiskey. That one's coming from Iowa. Great release there. I got a 4-year sitting here right next to me. It is on the floor, but it could be on the shelf. So technicality there. There's technically floor whiskey today, but that's just because I need to clean this basement. And then the other thing that they're doing is they're finishing casks as well. So I mentioned that 1,000 bottle release that came out earlier in the year. What they did with that one was they finished it with an amber on a rope and then in honey barrels. Great combination. It was also a boo rye, which I think made it extra special. Then this one that I got in my hands here is a rye whiskey from Sagamore, toasted. Once again, I don't know anyone else who's releasing Sagamore's distillate and then experimenting with it and toasting it. So the fact that they're doing the blending, they're doing the finishing, they're releasing great single barrels, they're bringing groups in to do picks, all of that is crazy to me for a year operation, plus all the great marketing with these dang logos and everything that guy got going on. I mean, once again, I sit there and I process all the different moves and all the different components. Love what they're doing, and I love the fact that they're sharing it with the community here. If you're interested in these releases, you can go through their Patreon, and then they do it through Bourbon Outfitters, if Bourbon Outfitters can deliver to your area. But that's how I've gotten most of my bottles, straight to my door. So that highlights 5 brands that I think are absolutely killing 2024 right now, not just because I fell in love with one bottle, but because I've been so interested in multiple bottles and multiple releases for various reasons. Quick recap, we did talk about Green River, Two Souls, New Riff, Kluke, and Ever Norse Spirits. Those are my 5 brands this year that I think are killing it. Let me know who you think is really rocking this game in 2024. What has kept you interested, not just for one release, but for multiple releases? What do you look forward to every time you see a new bottle from this distillery or from this brand pop up on the market? Curious to hear your perspective and if you agree or disagree with anything that I laid out here. So thank you for joining me today, whiskey friends. We'll catch you on the next Tuesday discussion. Goodbye, everybody.
Jeff, just be friends with me. But you have these whiskey friends, and you say hello again. Oh, Jeffrey, you should just be friends with me. But you have these whiskey friends, and you say hello again. Oh, Jeffrey, you should just be friends with me. But you have these whiskey friends, and you